this video, we're going to talk through some major red flags to look out for when you might be considering quitting your job. Many people, they end up in the wrong job and it creates a level of unhappiness, right? And here we're going to talk through an example of an individual who graduated from university, went into the corporate world, and then within 2 years, they end up quitting the job, right? So let's listen to a bit of her context here and see what she has to say. This is a video from Ifoma, if I'm pronouncing it correctly, Uhuna, and she worked in corporate. Let's listen to her story here.
Some background. I went to business school in Dallas. I went to UT Dallas in the DFW area. I majored in supply chain and marketing. I would say my whole life I wanted to be a lawyer. I thought just because I like to talk that I wanted to do law. When I thought about it, I actually cared more for the talking part and just being able to express myself than the actual law. So I thought it would be unethical to go down that route. And so I ended up just doing business in college because I thought, during the time I thought I would be a lawyer, but I was like, if I don't find a job, I can fall back on my business degree. So I ended up doing that, supply chain, but I originally started with just supply chain. I didn't really love it. I didn't have a passion for it. I just kind of went to it because I knew I didn't really want to do finance or accounting or a lot of the other business degrees. And for some reason, even though I always loved marketing, I thought like it was just too silly to go into. I don't know why. And eventually I ended up graduating. I did a lot of marketing related stuff during my college years. I was like an Amazon Prime student ambassador, and like I worked for my on-campus like activities board, like planning events, like all of my interests were obviously marketing, but I kind of just ignored it. And I was like, this is not like, you know, real life. You could probably only get a marketing job doing grunt work, and I didn't want to do that. So I went into supply chain and I ended up working for a telecommunications company. I interned there. I did full-time there. I think I did the internship for about a year, and then I worked there for, or I think it was a year and a half. And then I worked there for, I would say 1.5 full years of full-time work, because when I was an intern I didn't do full-time because I had like 16 other jobs, which is a story for another day. That's kind of the background of how I got into there. It was a supply chain internship and role that I applied for, and I think I was just so excited to work and show up and do anything and make money that I was just happy to be there. It's kind of shocking how I got the role and the job I did, because it was a very technical, like I'm talking Excel, like, okay, not very technical. I know there's a spectrum. My boyfriend is data science, so there's definitely, this is not the most technical, but for me, this was very technical. It was like Excel, SQL, kind of coding, analytics, all that kind of stuff. And I hated math and science. So, you know, put two and two together, it doesn't add up.
So before we move on and learn more about her story, let's consider some of the points here, right? Because as we go through the story, you'll see this is an important case of being authentic, taking risks for what you really want, and following and pursuing your values. Many other people also feel these type of emotions before they quit. They feel a sense of being lost. They feel a sense of not kind of fitting in within the corporate environment, and not knowing if really, not so much that, but more so if they've made the right life decision, because it is a big life decision you're expected to make at quite a young age, right? Feeling lost and not being sure if you're doing what is your true life purpose. Now, the first point here is around a business school, right? Is business school really worth it? There's many things you can learn online or from reading books or through just real experience of setting up your own business or setting up your own business as a personal brand online these days, right? Through social media. You can use YouTube to learn a lot of things. There's a term, YouTube University, where, you know, people make the joke that you can learn more from watching YouTube videos than you can going to a genuine university that costs tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars, right? And this is a better alternative approach. And what I would say is, in many cases, of course, it depends on individuals, but if you can focus on your paid education, your college or university, to learn a real technical skill, and then on the side you can do things that would consider like be business skills, right? Whether it's learning sales skills, some creative type of graphic design, whatever interests you, right? The way that works is that if you have a stable path, which is maybe plan A, which is doing your technical degree, learning accounting, engineering, coding, whatever that would be, that's kind of a good investment of your time in having those official certifications, right? And some of the other skills that you would want to learn without paying for very expensive degrees, like business degrees and things like that, you can learn it yourself. It's something that's a bit more easier to learn on the side. So you could have one skill that would be technical that you learn at college and university, that would give you a path to a good, stable corporate job, and in the future, perhaps self-employment, working as a contractor, a 1099 type employee, or being a freelancer. And on the side, you can learn those type of business skills that interest you, right? Rather than just going to business school, that sometimes can be overpriced and it's not the right fit for everyone. It can work for others though. Now she mentions, studying supply chain, and having an interest in marketing, and then she was considering about studying law, and she realized she wasn't actually interested in law, or law as a field of study, but more so the speaking aspect of it, right? And this is the thing. And then when it came to doing a business degree, she wasn't interested in some of the topics there. So that's kind of the first a red flag to look out for here, right? Because there's 5 red flags we'll go through. The first red flag is she mentioned something about studying supply chain because she just didn't seem to have an interest in the finance modules or the accounting modules at university. Now, when you pick something as an alternative to another, it's not good, right? It's a bit like a relationship, right? If you decide to be in a relationship with someone because they're not the alternative options out there, then it kind of doesn't really work out for you, because that's not the right way of making a decision. It's not like, oh, this is the best of a bad set of options, right? And the thing is, this is more important than, of course, a relationship in that example. It's like this is a case where you're picking a career path, picking a field of study that you're going to be engaged in over a long term, several decades, right? So it's a real long-term life decision that you need to think carefully. And if you're noticing red flags like, I'm studying law but I only have an interest in speaking and not actually the legal field, then that's going to lead to like workplace depression later on, 5 or 10 years later when you're in your career. Another thing could be when you're studying a particular field of study, like a business degree, and then you realize, well, I'm not really interested in the majority of these modules. There's just this one thing that's an alternative, supply chain, and then you do that. That's not good. A good thing that she did mention is doing some real experience while she's at university in marketing. Maybe not officially marketing, but being an ambassador for like a university and things like that. And one thing that's good at university, if you do have options to do some volunteer work, and I don't necessarily mean charity work, I mean volunteer work where maybe you're doing something for the university and then you can find what works for you. It could be you have good sales skills, so you're good at promoting the university, marketing, which you mentioned, maybe some technical elements. And you should use college or university as a trial and error thing, right? Partly that could be picking which modules to study, which subjects to study, but also any opportunity where you can do some work for maybe low pay or even free for the university or other organizations they might work with, internships, things like that. That's how you can figure out what you do and don't like, right? I remember during one of my internships at a major investment bank in the sales and trading division, there were 2 people within my department who had the internship, well in my kind of 2 teams that I was in, and it was me and a female who actually studied law. And she wasn't a bad person, but you could tell she wasn't that interested. She started it, kind of wasn't that interested, and there was a couple cases that are kind of funny where she fell asleep at the desk. And she wasn't like a bad person. She ended up being quite successful, working in the legal field, working as like a solicitor or an attorney. And I think she's looking forward to in the future kind of being a judge and doing things like that. I remember on Facebook at the time, she was having a lot of success there. But she tried the banking field and it didn't work for her. She wasn't interested in it. And some of the long hours where you're meant to like kind of play office politics, you could tell it was kind of draining for her. And sometimes on the sales and trading floor, you might have to be there at 7 a.m., leave at like 6, 7 p.m. It can be a bit taxing. And, if you pick the legal field where you maybe have more time by yourself to study or read, the relevant laws, come up with analysis, and you're more maybe of an introvert person, that could work for you more. So it's all about trial and error and making sure you can as quick as possible in your younger years, find out what you're good at, what you're not good at, what is going to work out long term for you, what is not. And it's quite important to do that. Another thing I wanted to point out is that when you start any job, there's a lot of grunt work, or what people call like glorified admin, just paperwork, shuffling papers, right? Being a paperwork shuffler, right? So you just need to understand that. So when you find a job and maybe you do your internship, just understand like what you do at the start might not be what you do later on. So understand how other people's career develops. You might start doing some boring data entry type of task, and then just figure out what people are doing 1 year into the job, 2 years, 3 years, 5, 10 years into the job, and that's where your career trajectory will head. So just bear that in mind, because when you start any job, it's going to be a bit boring, some of the work. And the thing is, like I say, you can pivot after a short internship. If something doesn't work for you, you can pivot to another area. Identify what you like and what you don't like early. And the key thing about doing that is doing that before you get pigeonholed into one career type, even within a field, right? Firstly, if you spend 5 years working in finance, then realize you don't like it, then it could be difficult to move into tech or law or another field, even though it is possible through doing qualifications, but you might start at a lower salary in that alternative field. But even within a field, say we just pick finance and you're just working in, let's just say, trade surveillance. You're reviewing employee trades and trading on the trading floor to make sure they're not engaged in insider dealing, any type of improper trading activity, market manipulation. And so you're just working in that field, or you're reviewing trade surveillance alerts every day, and it becomes really tedious after a time, and you're like, is this the rest of my life, just reviewing potential cases of improper trading? And then what ends up happening after that is that you kind of get pigeonholed if you do that for several years, and then you can't switch out of it. So if you're realizing you're not kind of a good fit for what you're doing, you need to kind of figure out how to change, right? And then the other thing I wanted to focus on is not getting caught up in the glamour of the work environment, right? Job titles, fancy presentations, and big conference meetings, the clothes, the office, the theater of the office. Because there's only two things that are real in the corporate environment, and that's your money and your time. Right? And the key thing is to maximize those. It could be in the future where you have a long-term plan to work remotely so you can maximize your time. It could be promotions and job hopping so you can maximize the money you could earn. So that's the two things to remember. Am I maximizing my money? Am I maximizing my time, as in free time, right? Because that financial freedom, time freedom, those are the key things. Don't get caught up in the, oh, we have a workplace brunch that is so good. They give us free lunch and free Starbucks coffees. I mean, that's like a cheap thing that they give you to kind of ridicule you as like, oh, this is good enough, isn't it? Right? What you want is a bigger bonus. You don't want a free coffee from the local coffee shop, right? And then the other thing is, the second red flag is she mentions things about how she's just happy to be there. She's working in some of these corporate environments and she's just happy to be there. The thing is, that's like the bare minimum, right? You should set a higher bar for yourself. Just being happy to go to a fancy office isn't enough to get you through a job you might not like. Just being excited to work there and make money. Set the bar higher for yourself. Set the bar at self-employment so you can maximize your time freedom. Set the bar at a particular job title you might be pursuing. And the third red flag is, going into a field and saying you're surprised you got the job, right? I understand she's saying it in the sense she's happy to get the job, but a lot of people, they apply for a bunch of things, they're not sure what they want, and they're just surprised they got an opportunity, because deep down they know they weren't really into it. They just happened to get that job because maybe they went to a good university and the company they're applying for wanted someone from that university, and they happened to do okay in the job interview. If you're surprised you got a job, you have to question, do you actually want it, or do you just fall into it? And many people are like victims of just falling into their circumstances, a particular corporate career due to certain scenarios that they're around, right? So if you're studying supply chain because you're not interested in finance accounting, in her case, and then she just fell into a job within supply chain, that type of niche, right? So it's the same thing, right? In the sense that many people, they just happen to maybe be around friends or family who studied accounting. They go into an accounting career, find it's boring, they don't like it, and it's not actually what they want to do. And in this case, it became quite serious because she was in a technical job and she didn't have an interest in maths and science, right? Or she wasn't too good at that particular aspect. Then it really leads to an issue where your career growth is stunted. You end up at a lower level for long time periods because you can't deal with those type of technical skills. So it's important to dig deep early on in your life to find out what you actually want, so you don't end up stuck in a difficult position where you can't move, because then you're stuck in a position where you only have one type of job you can do, as far as recruiters and companies want to hire for. It's very difficult to pivot, and now everything in your life is dependent on that job you don't like, right? Your income, your ability to survive, and you find it very difficult to maneuver later on. So the earlier you figure these things out, the better. So let's continue to listen here.
A applying because literally, I kid you not, I thought that my manager at the time, I thought she dressed really well. See, this is what I'm saying. Like, the things weren't adding up. I thought she dressed really well, so I was like, wow, this is the place for me. Like, I loved her skirt. And I remember when I was doing the job, I would just be focused on like the dashboards that we were creating. I'd be focused on the colors and the branding, and like, it's just funny looking back now how much I just wasn't aligned with my actual job. Corporate was a very interesting experience for me. I think I loved it up until I didn't, literally. Like, I think I came in making a good wage, and I was just excited to like be on my own. I graduated and I wanted to live on my own, so I could afford a place that I really liked, and I lived in a really cute city. I just romanticized the idea of being like Carrie Bradshaw. Like, you know, like I wasn't actually thinking about the job. I was just thinking about all the things the job would give me so that I could like go prance around. After I had...
So that's an interesting point to follow up on here, right? So firstly, this is a fourth red flag. So she was just interested in the job because she thought the superficial elements of it looked good. Her manager was dressing well, and then she was caught up in the superficial elements of the job itself, you know, the color and branding on some of the system dashboard she was working on. If you're too caught up in the appearances, the superficial elements of the job, that's a very small part of the job, right? It's not the actual work. It's not the day-to-day aspect of the type of people you might to deal with. I've had similar experiences on the trading floor where, you know, people get caught up in, you know, the fancy client dinners and spending time with clients in the evening, but they don't realize, okay, they have to come into work the next day super early in the morning, like 7 a.m., be in the office and get on with the work, right? So it's like that fun corporate dinner you had is really going to eat into your free time, your sleep. You might have to do it on a regular basis to the point where it just doesn't impress you much anymore, right? Being on a fancy trading floor, going to an expensive client dinner where you spend, or depending on how much the company would be funding it for, you know, $100, $200 for a simple meal, and being in a fancy restaurant, that kind of novelty factor, it wears off after a time period, right? And the other thing is, lots of times the pay is not enough to kind of give you the fulfillment you're looking for, right? Sometimes if you're just doing a job for the lifestyle, it could leave you unfulfilled if what you do for 8 hours a day is something you don't like, right? If you're just getting a high paying job and then you're like, oh, that's fine. Well, I might not like the job, but I can live in a fancy apartment in the center, in downtown, or in a city center area. Then, you know, it kind of wears on you that, you know, spending 8 hours a day to do something you don't like, or more often than not for these high paying corporate jobs, just to live a fancy life you don't even have maybe much time to enjoy, or the novelty factor of that wears off too. So you have to be careful about what you're picking, right? And the fifth red flag I want to point out, she mentioned something about feeling like Carrie Bradshaw, which is from Sex and the City, the TV show. So this is a common theme with women. And there's lots of propaganda out there aimed at women and men in different things. You know, might have Mad Men, which is aimed at men, or kind of these Suits, glamorous type of TV shows. I don't really watch these shows, but they kind of promote the corporate environment in a very false way, as, oh, it's super fun, or it's super interesting, dealing with some of these like office politics dynamics, when it can be quite brutal and ruthless in real life. So you just need to bear that in mind, right? So a lot of women have been fed that propaganda, this kind of girl boss, girl power propaganda. It's a common theme with women, this delusional idealization of a corporate job. Like I said, it's promoted to women in some media and men in other media. And they think it's all about fun, about social status, but they don't think about the actual work they have to do, right? And this is a typical type of propaganda aimed at a lot of people. So she mentions, you know, after 1 year, kind of not feeling like she was too into the work, thinking about pivoting, and how she needed to kind of dig deep and find out what she needed to do next. And we're going to continue reacting to this video in a future video in a couple days. So we'll come back to her. Her channel is called Ifoma Ahuna. You can see it on the screen right now. So it'd be interesting to see further, you know, other lessons we can learn about how to know if you're trapped in a job that isn't the right fit for you. So just to recap those 5 points, the first red flag is if you're studying something that you're not that into, it's just the best alternative. It's probably a sign you need to think deeper about what you want to do in life. Secondly, if you just have phrases like you're happy to be here, or thirdly, that you're surprised you got the job, these are things where you just kind of fall into the job. It's not something you actually want. Fourthly, if you're just focused on superficial elements about managers dressing well, or the fifth point would be if you're just consumed with the propaganda of working a corporate job rather than being into that specific field of work, those are all signs you need to kind of quit your job. Those 5 major red flags: you're trapped in the wrong job, and you might need to look elsewhere. So I've worked in the finance industry for over a decade. I'm sure many of you see my previous videos, Goldman's, Morgan Stanley, and I've recently launched a new career coaching program. It's a 12-week program. Will help revolutionize your career, expose a lot of the secrets of hacking the corporate environment, dealing with office politics, building your financial freedom, being a man at work and dealing with the political correctness there, and how to prepare for promotions, which you might be fortunate to get, but also layoffs, which are quite common in the corporate environment, particularly in recent years. So I'll help you navigate that and build a more self-sufficient, stable lifestyle for yourself. So there's a link in the description if you want to get started with some career coaching and push you in the right direction. Thanks for listening. 2 recommended videos on the screen right now, and I'll see you next time.